Hello and welcome to another Tech Tuesday. My name is Jeff Gorell with Convergent Technologies Group. Today's topic is automation. You see there's a lot of talk about automation, whether it's moving stuff back and forth from the cloud in a hybrid IT environment, just maintaining systems. Basically, what you're looking to do is you want to take these recurring tasks and the repeatable ones, the ones that have a complex set of commands, for example, and turn it into something that you can just fire off at a certain time, or if certain other conditions are met, and it automatically does what you would hope is a multi-step process without having to manually do the multi-steps, right? Back when I was a young Unix admin, we did a lot of this, right? Every day. For example, every morning I would have to come in, run a bunch of commands, verify everything's working, look at system monitor stuff, fire off backups, and verify backups had been run. It was the first part of my day. And as I got the hang of it, as I got more comfortable with what those steps were and what to look for, I would spend time automating it, right? And in that case, it was writing shell scripts, and anything that needed to be triggered on time basis would be put in cron. So it would just fire up. Generally, I was getting the first part of my morning done before I even arrived at work, and then I could just check on it, right? And eventually I added things like, email me a notification, whether it failed or whether it succeeded, or the stats I'm looking for. So I'd come in, fire up, the email, and just look and see, everything's good. Disk space is fine, memory utilization, processor, blah, blah, blah. It gave me back my first couple of hours in the morning. And that's what we're talking about doing, right? Again, it has to be a thing that's repeatable. It has to be something that's worth automating, right? There's the old joke about Unix system admins about spending days writing a script to save 5 minutes every morning. And that was actually true. Of course, we'd spend days doing that because we wanted to make sure that it worked perfectly every time. It doesn't make any sense to write a half-done scripted process and then have to fix it every couple of days or adjust for things. In fact, those initial scripts I wrote became bigger and bigger with more validation checks and that kind of stuff, and pretty soon, I won't say the system was operating on its own, but there was a lot of this, we'll call it menial system admin work that I didn't have to do, which meant I could focus on more interesting and hopefully more important to my employer, just tasks and projects and that kind of thing, and that's really what we're looking for. Now, I bring this up because Logic Monitor, who is a monitoring platform, came out with a study that surveyed IT leaders in the US, the UK, I think Australia and New Zealand. And then this was, it surprised me when I was looking at it that this was about half of the results out of that survey involved automation. Now, shouldn't surprise me too much because Logic Monitor does some of this automation stuff as part of their product. So, setting that aside, it's still valid. I mean, it struck a chord with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be, talking to you about it today. And the key takeaways from the automation section, anyway, is providing the opportunity to do more strategic things with your time instead of mundane, repeating tasks, right? Those things get tedious after a while, and then sometimes you get a little sloppy, or you typo the command, because a lot of these commands are at least in the Unix world or Linux now, are complex, lots of options, and the time savings is just in general is, once you automate it, you don't really have to do it. You just need to check on it. And if you build into your automation reporting, you just have to read your email, deal with any anomalies that come up, and then hopefully code to fix that. Which that in turn saves money, because if you have, say, even one person spending half a day every day doing these, again, mundane system administration checks and tasks, then you may end up needing to hire a whole nother person to do your strategic stuff, your additional things, the things that actually move the company forward versus maintaining its position at the moment. Not to mention, automating things reduces the errors. Like I said, I've typoed a command more than once, and not having to do those, again, complex command line things, or even if Windows environment, even if it's just click, I bet you've clicked somewhere in the wrong place before, because you're just kind of going through the motions, because it's mundane and boring, and it's, the error rate is reduced greatly. Now we start talking about moving workloads, moving virtual machines back and forth from the cloud or over to a different tier of service, or those processes are complex. And again, if you can simplify it, if you can make your part of the job to do that a matter of invoking a script, then you've exponentially increased your capabilities, your ability to do other things besides clicking things around and waiting for it to move and then verifying. And you automate all that, you get the results back. Hey, my server moved from on-prem to off-prem. It's running. Here are the performance metrics. Here's how long it took. We're all good. Now, so some of the concerns of these IT leaders is how much time it takes to get this process right, and that's a valid concern. It takes a lot of, at least initially, the first time you're doing it, and depending on the services that are running on this virtual machine, it takes some time to get it right. Like I said, I'd spend a couple of days perfecting the script that would do, I won't say a relatively simple, but relative to moving stuff back and forth between data centers, a relatively simple task. And, over time, that eventually paid back, right? Concern valid is that, will you get paid back? Some of the other ones, let me look over at my list here. Oh, quality controls. Can you QC this stuff? If you have automation that fires, let's say you build in triggers that say, oh, okay, if it's a web server, internal service of some kind, or a database or whatever, I'm watching for certain triggers that say, oh, the load is increased to a point where I need to either spin up another instance of this so that I have the capacity to serve everyone who's trying to get these services, whatever they are, or even watch to see when I can tear that one down, especially if you're in a cloud environment. You don't want to be spending money on running instances when nobody is using them or needs them, right? So the quality control about keeping the right things running in the right place. And that involves, again, as I was saying before, I needed to know that things ran, why they ran, or when they ran, either, and was it successful? So building in those quality control things. Is it taking too long for that extra instance to start up? And if so, why? Let's figure out how to fix that. Those kind of things are really important, and that's a valid concern, right? And by the way, those are the worst things to try to code because it's boring. One of the items says lack of flexibility. I'm not sure what specifically they're talking about, unless they're talking about their own internal systems aren't flexible enough to be able to do automation, right? I mean, if you're still running kind of in an old school manner, let's say you're still on bare metal, you really don't have a whole lot of flexibility there, right? You're not moving workloads back and forth. So, I mean, I need to read a little deeper into this report, but lack of flexibility seems to be one of them. And then, as with anything we invest in, time, whether it's time, dollars, new projects, blah, 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 you got to be confident that you can get your return on investment, right? Without that, all of it's kind of pointless, because if you're not going to gain from the automation, for example, if you're not going to gain efficiencies, and by efficiencies, I mean being able to run your workloads where they need to be, and being able to save, the human capital. If you don't have to have somebody manually spin these things up, you just really need to launch a script of some kind, or click a button. Then you're not going to get your return, right? If you're not getting savings of some kind, then you're not going to get the return on that investment, and that's a huge concern, which makes perfect sense. So as you look at how you operate, look at how you can start pulling efficiencies into your environment through automation. And the low-hanging fruit is those daily, weekly, monthly tasks that somebody has to do manually, and then go from there, right? You start looking at a hybrid cloud environment, then you really want to look at some automation. Whether even if it's just monitoring and making sure that services are running and restarting services if they're needed, without the human having to click stuff. There's lots of things that can be automated. Office 365 has just come out with RPA, robotic process automation. I'm not sure where the robot comes from, but we'll just call that marketing. There's lots of things you can do just personally as far as automation goes. I've got one that says if I flag an email, it adds it to my to-do list. I just look at my to-do list, don't have to go into the flagged email folder and parse through it, although it's still there. So there's lots of personal automation things. There's lots of big internal IT automations, and then you start going hybrid or even cloud only. There's lots of things that you could automate to avoid A, human error, and B, wasting a human's time that could be better used for more productive purposes. I'd love to talk to you about this or pretty much anything else, so give us a call. The number is 804-353-5307. Give your sales rep a call. If you don't have one, just fire off an email to sales@ctgva.com. Hope everyone's being safe and happy, and I will talk to you again soon.